exactly.
What is good? Osiris here, stuck in the middle, and the definition of words matter. They do matter, especially when things are tough. If we don't define the problem accurately and the definition of the term isn't defined accurately, then we can end up doing the wrong things and repeating mistakes. And I'm talking about inflation. Inflation, the definition of inflation is very simple. It's when you introduce new money into circulation.
Again, there's a million problems with measuring inflation by the CPI or by prices in general. The Austrian economists would say that the creation of money and credit is inflation in itself. It's not about prices.
Whether it's with debt or by printing it, or now we digitally just make it out of thin air. That's all it is. Period. You don't need to be an economist to understand that. You don't need to be a mathematician to understand 2 + 2 is 4. This isn't complicated stuff. But so when you look at it, when Joe Biden says it's a Putin price hike, you've got to really understand what that means.
I understand inflation is a real challenge to American families. Today's inflation report confirmed what Americans already know. Putin's price hike is hitting America hard. Putin's price hike is hitting America hard.
How can you hold people accountable if you don't know what that means? So the breaking headline is soaring gas prices lead White House aides back to brainstorming. And when they get back to brainstorming, if they don't know what it is, or they do know what it is and they're just for some reason ignoring that,
Putin's price hike is hitting America hard.
We as common people aren't able to hold them accountable. You better forget about this red and blue bandana. Because if you keep that blue bandana on and support the blue bandana boss, they could be robbing you blind right in front of your face as you support them. So when you go to the government, what does the government do to solve any problem? They print money, find a way to spend money, take more money. That's not always the answer. And I'd rather you not do anything than they are now looking at fuel rebates. The same nonsense they were doing in California. Who's paying for the fuel rebates? You're trying to fight fire with fire. The problem with inflation is straight up money in circulation. So their answer to this is to spend more?
Biden officials are taking a second look at whether the federal government could send rebate cards out to millions of American drivers to help them pay at gas stations, an idea they examined months ago before ruling it out. Aides had found that shortages in the U.S. chip industry would make it hard to produce enough rebate cards, two people familiar with the matter said. White House officials also fear there would be no way to prevent consumers from using them for purchases other than gasoline, according to another person familiar with the discussions. Even if the administration embraces the proposal, it would probably require congressional approval and face long odds among lawmakers wary of spending more money.
My goodness. So the only reason they didn't do the cards is because there was a chip shortage, or they probably would have tried to do this already? They're playing off of your ignorance. There was a great clip I'm going to end with from Brian Donald, congressman out of Florida.
For 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Witnesses, panelists, thanks for being here. I find it interesting that we're talking about the American Rescue Plan since it just didn't work, guys. I mean, come on, I'm a finance guy by trade. I just got to Capitol Hill. Couple things. I know the witnesses have said previously that the benefits of the American Rescue Plan have been the potential evictions for people not having enough money to pay rents, decrease in child poverty.
Just as a reminder, the American Rescue Plan was the plan that spent $1.9 trillion, sent 14 checks of $1,400 to people, and that was signed on March 11th, 2021. We can say the same thing about the CARES Act under Trump. This is not a red or blue team or even Maga team type of discussion. This is just a money discussion. When it comes down to money, you can't be on anybody's team other than your own wallets.
I think those are like the big two. Well, we'll come back to that. Give me a second. We'll get there. That the benefits of the American Rescue Plan have been the potential evictions for people not having enough money to pay rents, decrease in child poverty. Those are like the big two.
See, what I like about what Byron's doing here is he's talking about, okay, I understand your thoughts on what the benefits of it were. So there's always pros and cons. If people are not talking about the pros and cons of any decision you make in life has pros and cons. If you're not talking about the pros and cons, then something's wrong. You're either have a blind spot or you're being disingenuous.
Well, we'll come back to that. Give me a second. We'll get there. But it's without question that the American Rescue Plan has led to inflation. Every economist basically has said this. I mean, look, if you want to talk about inflation, you have a lot of money going to people. Right, wrong, or indifferent, money went to people. They didn't have to earn it, which means productivity in the economy is actually down. So people have money, but productivity is down.
Money went to not just people, but when you look at the American Rescue Plan, it was all over the place. I'm showing an interactive tool that helps you navigate where the 1.5 trillion went. It's a lot of money. Money we didn't have. Money we borrow for. State and local fiscal recovery funds, $362 billion. Direct financial assistance, $656 billion. Assistance to individuals and families, $56 billion. Education and childcare, $211 billion. Health, $86 billion. Transportation, $40 billion. Other programs, $60 billion. So my feedback to Byron, I think Byron's doing a great job, and it's easy for me to say after the fact, but I wouldn't have narrowed it down to money to people. It was money going to everyone, and what I want to focus on is this is money, 1.9 trillion that was created out of thin air. That's the problem. Not that money went to people. So we have to kind of watch how we say that, because now when you look at the populist left or just common people, they look at that and like, are you just evil? Do you just hate that money went to people? No. It's not about money going to people. It's about we didn't have the money in the first place. So we just created it out of thin air. So that's an opportunity for him to educate people. The problem is this magic, poof, 1.9 trillion. That's the problem.
A lot of money going to people. Right, wrong, or indifferent, money went to people. They didn't have to earn it, which means productivity in the economy is actually down. So people have money, but productivity is down. But when people will take that money to go spend it, I mean, yes, doctor, this is kind of how this works.
Somebody can't be questioning him right now. Now, I do have some more feedback, but it sounds like somebody was trying to look at him funny or question what he was saying there. There's nothing to question here. This is just objective truth.
When they take the money to go spend it in an economy where productivity is down because there's not enough supply of goods and services available, prices then go up in response because productivity is down, but everybody's got money. That's how we get to inflation.
No, that's not, Byron. And he's doing a great job. It's important to kind of narrow this down. The inflation is creating the poof 1.9 trillion. That's it. That's it. Don't talk about inflation anymore on anything else. So you have inflation from the 1.9 trillion introducing new money into circulation. Now, what he's talking about is all accurate, but that's just basic supply and demand. So you have inflation is part of the reason stuff went up. And then on top of that, you have asinine policy that created where yes, people got money and then the supply chain is messed up. And so there's less supply and you introduce money to the system that keeps the demand up. So that supply and demand, that was an increase in price based on supply and demand. That's a separate topic. But yes, inflation, then on top of that supply and demand issue, you increase prices more. It's important to distinguish the difference there.
The job market. Let's talk about that one real briefly. Yes, coming out of the time when the American economy was shut down by government policy because of COVID-19, the job market suffered major hits. But it's virtually without question that in the red states that had opened up, I'm the gentleman from Florida, I know, The job market actually responded quite well to businesses being able to open up and operate. It was
So Byron's doing a great job, but so if I were to relay out what he's doing here, the theme of his, because I was for payments, not for all this bloat, not for all this other stuff. When I read through the packages, the CARES Act and all, there's some crazy stuff in there. If they would have passed the bill just for checks, literally that's all it was, checks for common people, I'd have been fine. Nothing to businesses, nothing to anything else, and then opening up. Here's my point though. The seed, the bad seed was lockdowns. When I say lockdowns, people say, well, we weren't locked down. Well, you chose winners and losers in the economy, and millions of people had to stay home. They couldn't work. That caused a ripple effect of, oh, so now how are they going to pay their rent? Well, obviously, the government has to help, or you have to do something. Otherwise, you'll literally have millions of people in the street, homeless, and complete civil unrest. That's kind of how we got to George Floyd, because these checks weren't going to cover everything. So the thesis here is lockdowns can't ever happen again. That's the thesis before we even get to inflation. Because if you lock things down, now you have two bad options. And you obviously can't trust government to introduce new money into currency without everyone, companies, big businesses like, oh, you're dealing out money, let me get some too. Because they don't care about inflation as much, people at the top, because it doesn't hurt them as much. There are people who are so well off, they could pay $50 for a loaf of bread and they wouldn't even know.
Some blue states with the job market did not respond as well. Well, we all knew up here on Capitol Hill that if you just, opened up, the businesses would come back. Look no further than right here in D.C. Muriel Bowser's policies basically wrecked the restaurant market here in D.C. Most people could not go to work in D.C. There was no traffic coming into D.C. And the second she alleviated COVID-19 policies, businesses started opening up again, people started going back to work, etc. So I don't think we needed about $2 trillion to recover jobs in the United States. I think what we really needed was just sound, local government policy or state government policy to just open up economies.
And the federal government is there. They should be leading and saying, because what happened is the federal government led with everything has to be locked down. And that's Dr. Fauci is the number one dude behind that, in my opinion. He didn't speak against it. We had the Barrington Declaration that behind the scenes, we know through FOIA requests that Dr. Fauci was against. So that means that even if he didn't say it outwardly and openly, he was for lockdowns and against people even having the ability to speak and say, no, that was the wrong decision. That caused us down a path where there was no good way out of that once you started doing that.
States that did that, that's what happened. I want to speak to inflation specifically because this is where we are now. The trip down memory lane was cool. One thing I will say about the states and local governments is that when the American Rescue Plan came through, I know myself and several of the members were looking for an Excel spreadsheet about what states and localities actually needed.
So you break this down. Lockdowns were the problem. Okay. Separate the topic. Love how he did that. Like, okay, I'm done about the past. Here we are now. And he's talking about, well, when we did the bill, we didn't have anything showing us exactly what were the problems to match the money to. Same thing as like Ukraine. Rand Paul was like, well, who's monitoring where the money's going? Like they're just putting money out there. And it's like, wait, we didn't even have like a detailed list of like, here's the problem. Here's the money we need to solve the problem. So we're just throwing out checks. And a lot of states didn't even spend all their money. Some of them still have some of that money, I believe.
And what they perceived were going to be the shortfalls in their budget. There was a funding formula that was created, but there was no spreadsheet about, okay, New York needs this, Mayor Williams, your city needs X, Los Angeles needs Y, Miami, Florida needs Z.
When you're dealing with money, man, there has to be stuff like that. We can't have Congress out here just spending money. That's why we have to define inflation the right way. They're just throwing money around. They don't even have like, it's not even tied to any type of research or even basic understanding of what the need is.
There was no spreadsheet or no allocation. There was no back and forth that actually rose to a number. It was a funding formula. And they just picked a number out of the air and said, we're going to spend X amount of money to state and local governments. So when state and local governments have money to spend, not quite sure what they're going to spend it all. Some figured it out, some didn't. You have a glut of money sitting out there in the economy that gets spent in reckless means. And I'm going to bring this back to the productivity point. People were not working to the degree that they need to work in an economy like ours, which means product is not available for purchase to the degree of the amount of money that's out there to purchase, which means prices go up. Mayor Williams, you said earlier that your constituents would still say that the American Rescue Plan is still a good thing in spite of the inflation that has been created in the United States. Do you think your constituents would actually choose paying $65 per fill-up or the American Rescue Plan?
Thank you for that question. I'm not going to play that game.
No, bro, we're not playing games. Don't start off like that. This is a House Budget Committee meeting. He said Mayor Williams. I don't even know who that mayor is. Bro, don't start out like that. This ain't a game. I don't need that. You're here to answer these questions. See, this is what happens when you talk with these leftists on either the establishment Republicans or Democrats. He spent that whole time talking about logic, economics, and then you talk to and you say leftists, what do you think? And they say you're heartless, you're racist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with that language of getting to the truth again. In social life.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. And if you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
I'm not gonna play those games. Bro, that's not substantive. I just spent all this time. Do you have anything to comment on what I just said, bro?
I'm gonna reclaim my time right there.
Yeah,
I'm gonna reclaim my time, bro. I'm not playing games with you. Answer the question.
They're going to have to fill up. It's $65, man. Look, I got a sedan.
I know.
That's what you have to do in Congress. If they start playing those games, no, I'll reclaim my time. I don't have time for you. If you're not going to answer the question, I'm reclaiming my time. There's more that I could talk about.
I'm not going to play that game. I'm going
to reclaim my time right there.
Yeah, reclaim your time.
They're going to have to fill up. It's $65, man. Look, I got a sedan.
I know how much it is. Sir, I know how much it is. I just got a text from my daughter yesterday.
I know how much it is,
She spent $65. She spent $75 to fill her.
This is my time, sir.
Sir, I know how much it is. I just got a text from my daughter yesterday.
I know how much it is,
She spent $65. She spent $75 to fill her tank up.
And what's better?
But, the American Rescue Plan saved human lives.
So here we go with just generalities again. Didn't answer a question, didn't address anything that he just said. It saved lives. It was diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're racist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really uncomfortable with that language of getting to the truth again. In social life.
Why is that uncomfortable?
Because it sounds actually deeply transphobic to me. If you keep probing, we're gonna stop the interview.
You're with Maga. It's there's no substance at all, man. We can't continue. We can't do this.
So I am not going to equate the price of gas over a human life.
Let's talk about.
See, there it is, and that is a classic. That is a classic type of leftist point of view. This is it's good.
So I am not going to equate the price of gas over a human life.
It's good. You should pay higher. I'm not going to equate. How could you equate? You could pay $1,000 a gallon and it would be worth all the lives it saved. That's what he's going to say. But the thing is, they always hide how many lives did lockdowns cost. Period. Forget about what we're even talking about here. You don't even factor that in. With unliving yourself, all these substance abuses, every other factor, these other chain reactions from the lockdowns. Don't bring it up. It saved lives. We don't even, where are you getting that from?
Human lives. Let's talk about this. The COVID-19 vaccinations, which were basically ready for distribution around January 2021, that's when they were ready for deployment. They were deployed out in a systematic fashion. If you look at the deployment rate per day of COVID-19 vaccines. There was no change in the rate per day between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. There was no change. As a matter of fact, the Biden administration was slow in vaccine deployment. They had to actually drop the FEMA sites that they were doing because it was the most inefficient way. They actually had to follow the Ron DeSantis model, which was actually giving it to pharmacies so they can deploy the vaccines in a much more efficient manner. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This was fun. I yield back.
Gentleman's time is
I don't know how he got off track at the end. They can get you off track. But overall, great comment there from Byron Donald. I've been following him because I've seen him. I'm like, okay, I kind of like this dude, and I wait to hear some substance. We won't get much legislation because his point of view is not going to be accepted unless he's funding money for wars or taking away 2A rights. You're not going to get anything bipartisan. I am hoping that Elon Musk will be able to acquire Twitter and give us some type of freedom of reach, freedom of speech. He used this term that I'm going to be taking from him, freedom of reach. That's why it's so important to show and teach as many people what is inflation and what's not. Once you understand what inflation is, then you go back and look at what we've been doing in a different light. So I support Elon Musk. That's why I support him. I don't think he's some benevolent, some guy who's just doing things out the kindness of his heart. He has his own goals. It's okay for your goals to overlap with somebody's goals, even if they are a billionaire. So I have no new gear. Plaid Maga. For those like me who support Tesla, SpaceX, Boring Company, Neuralink, all that stuff, Elon Musk, understand there's dangers there too, but I like the products, I like the approach, and I like the opportunity to unite us and to give us freedom of reach. Tesla now means a lot more than it used to with him trying to buy Twitter. I'm Plaid Maga. Let me know what you think. Is it important? Am I spending a whole video on something that's not important? Or is it important? Is it possible to reach normies and just give them, this is basic understanding. Is it possible to reach people and to make change in that way? Let me know what you think. Take care.